Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Last Catch, Conversations on the Columbia and Snake Rivers. I am Angela Jackson, your host, and I would like to thank you for joining us this lunch hour. As we get started, I would be interested to know where our audience is coming from. So please take a moment and add your name and your location to the chat. And in today's episode, From Millions to Memories, Stories of Abundant Salmon and Orca, we explore what it means to have gone from once abundant salmon runs to the precarious state we face today, and what it will take to bring them back. We will also discuss the impact of this loss on numerous species downstream throughout the Pacific Northwest, such as the beloved southern resident orcas. On September 12th, we witnessed a tragedy that is becoming all too common in the Northwest. A mother orca carrying her deceased calf in the Salish Sea. Southern resident orca Alki was seen pushing her newborn body in Rosario Strait. This heartbreaking image mirrors Telequa's two tours of grief in 2018 and again earlier this year. In the last 2 years, 5 calves were born in the southern resident orca populations. However, only 2 of them are alive and surviving today. And what does the future look like for struggling and endangered populations when 2/3 of births end in this tragedy? We hope to gain more insights from our guests during this lunchtime conversation. And so I would like to welcome today Dr. Giles from CDOC Society and Jay Hesse from the Nez Perce tribe. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to be here.
So I'm going to start off. We'll start off this conversation today. Dr. Giles, can you briefly explain the relationships between salmon and orca and why it's such critical ecological link?
Sure. So the southern resident killer whales are a fish-eating population. It's an incredibly small population of whales at this point, just 74, possibly 75 individuals. They co-evolved eating Pacific salmon. Their range goes from Monterey, California, all the way up to, according to their listing document, up to Southeast Alaska. But honestly, they've only been documented there one time. Really, their range is up to about Haida Gwaii, north of Vancouver Island, and then down to Monterey, California for Cape Cod and El Pod. So again, these are fish-eating killer whales that co-evolved eating Pacific salmon. And the problem is that back when they were co-evolving with these fish, the fish were much larger. Fish coming out of the Snake River could have easily been over 100 pounds, even 120 pounds. So for a large-bodied, long-lived animal like a killer whale to preferentially seek out those Chinook salmon, it made sense in the past because they were caloric rich, they were fatty, had high fat content, and they were massive. And so it gave the whales an opportunity to forage together to share food. Now the problem is that salmon are shrinking. The average sized salmon in Washington state is just 12.5 pounds. So for these large animals that have to eat several hundreds of pounds of food per day per whale, that's a lot of foraging that has to go into just to meet their basic caloric needs. And what we're ending up finding is that the females that are not nutritionally sound are unable to bring their calf to term. They're miscarrying at a very high rate, and those a lot of the babies that are born die right away. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. But of course, the lack of salmon also has ecological implications for the river systems, the areas very, very, hundreds of miles inland from the Pacific Ocean, because salmon used to be able to bring the ocean nutrients up into the upper watersheds. And so that's causing cascading negative impacts as well.
So with that in mind, the change in size of the salmon, Jay Hesse, could you further explain how salmon populations have changed over the past few decades and what have been the most significant causes of their decline?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Historically, salmon and steelhead returning to the Columbia Basin as a whole numbered in probably the 16 to 20 million range. And the diversity of those species, both in um, the actual types of critters, so whether those were sockeye salmon or Chinook, as Giles just mentioned, steelhead, coho, different runs of Chinook, including fall Chinook. Those returned in those, tens of millions of fish coming back to the Columbia Basin, but they came back at different times of the year. And so you had those fish, entering the Columbia Basin or early in the spring with the start of the spring Chinook and continuing all the way through until late fall with coho returns and fall Chinook. But those fish then would be present for both human interactions throughout really the entire calendar year, but also supplying an ecological role for the upper Snake Basin, one of the largest tributaries to the Columbia. Salmon represented really the main nutrient source for the ecology of that landscape, and a major chunk of Idaho, northeast Oregon, and southeast Washington tributaries. And those marine-derived nutrients from salmon really were the ecological engine for not only the biota in the streams, but up through really the ridge tops, and the signals of those marine-derived nutrients can be seen in tree cores and the sediment aspects throughout that area. So really a major function. So if you think about that historically, mid 1800s, and the 10 to 16 million or more fish, where we're at now, entering the Columbia Basin is 2 million fish this last year. And so just a fraction of that, and 2 million fish sounds like a lot, but relatively to where it was historically, that's just a small fraction. And then you start to petition that out into the different areas throughout the basin, and the numbers of fish returning into the Snake Basin into central Idaho are much lower. So and a vast majority of those are hatchery origin fish that return back to specific release locations. So about 200,000 total salmon and steelhead entered the Snake Basin this last year. And if you break that down into specific stock of spring summer Chinook, the species that Giles mentioned is so critical to Orca, the natural production of those fish was about 8,500 returning back to the basin. So that's into the entire Snake Basin. If you start to then distribute those out into the respective populations that still have fish going to them, you end up with about 33% of them, so about a third of the populations had 50 or fewer natural origin fish. That's just not enough to, one, supply the marine-derived nutrients for the ecology, but it is really on the brink of functional extirpation for those populations. So if you think about this in the context of the title of today's presentation, From Millions to Memories, the millions is highlighted for that mid 1800s. And we're really at the memory standpoint. But where I really become concerned is that the memories are eroding. And in human behavior, we tend to have some diminishing expectations as memories are lost. And so typically you have recognition of things about a generation back. By the time you get 7 generations back, which was the mid 1800s, you lose that connection and really even recall of once was what here. And so you start to become accepting of those diminished returns. And that's a real loss to tribal cultures in particular, but also the ecology throughout this landscape.
It does have a lot of ripple effects on indigenous communities. And so I was wondering if either of you could point out what those are and the effects on local economies tied to this ecological story, where we're thinking about the memory already as these diminishing numbers are alarming right in front of us.
For me, the tie, one of the best examples that I've been able to come for me to understand what this shift was from the mid 1800s to current times was reading through some of the Spalding diaries, missionary from 1839, and a trip that he had taken to Northeast Oregon and the Wallowa River Valley. And in that diary from late July of 1839, highlights 3 days at one particular camp where they were camping with a tribal community. And in his diary, he highlights 300 fish taken on July 25th and 600 fish taken on July 26th and 600 or 700 fish taken on July 27th. You add all together, that's about 1,500 fish taken in one spot by one little small gathering of people. Today, if you look at what tribal harvest is for the Nez Perce community, it's kind of about double that for the entire season and for the entire Nez Perce. And so you think about 3 days at one spot now being equal to the total tribal harvest that's occurring, and the impacts that has not only on food sovereignty, fish that is a key nutrient value, but for community building, the lifestyles and culture that is centered around going out and being together and harvesting those fish is, I think, as important or more important as the nutrient value and food security that came from those fish resources.
Dr. Giles, do you have any comments about how the salmon are affecting the orca and the relationship between orca and indigenous communities?
I have more information or thoughts about that with it for this area where I am in the San Juan Islands, but I'm sure that it's. I would guess that it would be similar elsewhere. Just the fact that there's not as many fish coming back into the areas that the whales and tribes in this area can intercept the fish has had detrimental impacts for the southern resident killer whales and cultural impacts for the Coast Salish people here in the Salish Sea. As Jay mentioned, it's part of it has to do with the nutrients, the protein that is very important for both whales and tribes. But there's also the cultural aspect or the community aspect that's lost, and we see that with the killer whales. We're seeing that with the loss of superpods. We just don't have opportunities for all members of all three pods to come back to the Salish Sea. And we used to see that annually, where all three pods would be within calling range of each other. And they were able to do that because there was enough fish here to feed them and to keep them here. That's just not the case anymore. And it's similar for tribes where community and ceremony is just not able to happen centered around salmon like it used to be, because the salmon just isn't here. And so it is something that I've been learning more and more about older ways of fishing, what's now called terminal fishing. So allowing fish to come back to the natal river and fishing at or near the river of origin. And to me, that's something that if we could move that way in fisheries management, it makes sense from the perspective of whales and for the tribes that are down in the areas where the fish are kind of the origin of where the fish are. It makes better sense to me to be able to fish at those areas, because then we can keep a better tab on making sure that there's enough fish getting up into the rivers to spawn. So the so-called escapement number, and also an opportunity for again, whales and humans closer to the rivers of origin to be able to intercept them. And that's just not happening now. The fish is being caught in more in the open ocean or in Southeast Alaska, very, very far away from the spawning sites.
What are the current conservation efforts that show the most promise in restoring salmon populations or protecting orcas, like dam removal, for instance?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're seeing just the incredibly fast recovery of the Klamath River. I was trying to look that up really quickly, but I think it's already over 7,000 fish that have made it to the upper reaches above where the farthest inland dam would have been. Happening kind of right now as we speak. Salmon are coming back. It's incredible that salmon retain the genes, the so-called spring gene that codes for, at least in the Columbia, if anybody hasn't seen Shane Anderson's film, The Lost Salmon, it's a fabulous film talking about the spring gene that's still out there. It's still, there in the wild stocks that code for salmon to be big. Similarly, it's just shocking after so many decades of the Klamath River being down. These fish are making their way home, and very quickly, within days last year of the last dam coming down, there were females digging their reds. And so it's one of those things that if we, as the saying goes, if we build it, they'll come. If we unbuild it, they'll come. Dam removal is incredibly costly. I get that. It takes time, but the ecological impacts and the ecological benefit to removing dams it's just evident almost immediately. We saw it on the Elwha, and we're definitely seeing it on the Klamath.
I'll build on that a little bit. Angela, your previous question that I think we sidestepped was, what are some of the root causes that cause that decline from the 16 million down to just 2 million at current stocks status coming back into the Columbia? And those factors are diverse. They've changed over time. Originally, the cause of those declines was highly linked to overfishing from commercial standpoints and habitat destruction, blockages from either hydro system or irrigation diversions, and how that water was managed. There is habitat destruction from extraction resources, from timber harvest and minerals, that has impacted the productivity of the headwater streams, and temperature changes now. A lot of those factors have been managed better in the recent past. Harvest is highly constrained and abundance-based throughout the basin and the ocean at this point. And so the harvest rates that were in the 80% range in the late 1800s and early 1900s, highly constrained now, and more often in the 10% level, even if that high. But the legacy effects of that habitat destruction and the existing transformation of the migration corridors because of or from hydrosystem development are still having a significant impact on fish production today, especially up into the Snake Basin. And so a diversity of causes that has impacted those fish and drove them down, a new suite of things that are kind of holding those fish numbers down, but hydrosystem is a big part of that. Contemporarily, we have climate change and the warming waters and changed hydrographs that are associated with that are impacting the traditional habitats that fish evolved in at a very quick rate and really challenging those fish to evolve at the same time. So your question is, what tools do we have in the toolbox to bolster runs today, given that suite of limiting factors currently affecting the fish? And the hydrosystem and changing how hydrosystems impact fish is certainly one of the biggest knobs we can turn. And removing of the 4 lower snake dams has been identified as an essential action if we are going to get snake basin stocks back to healthy and abundant status. That is a big change, and understanding that those dams provide a number of services to our communities, both local and afar. That's a challenge to make those decisions and put into place where salmon can thrive and meet our expectations, but still meet the needs of our communities. And those solutions are out there, but it's going to take some time and big changes to get to that point. In the interim, the work that we do at the local landscapes to maximize or improve tributary habitat and make sure that fish have access to those habitats that are high in elevations and still connected to snowpack driven hydrology is going to be really important. And then considering how we maintain and improve fish passage through existing hydrosystems that either have fish passage but needs to be improved, or restoring fish passage in systems that currently have blocked access from both hydrosystem and water diversions. Maximizing that freshwater productivity in multiple angles is really important. There's just not one thing that we can do. So we talk about the hydrosystem a lot because it's the biggest single knob that we can turn. But there are other things that are going to have to be done in a suite of actions if we're going to be successful, all the way from the ocean environment, all the way up to the high elevation tributaries where a bunch of these salmon and steelhead spawn and do their initial early life history rearing.
Yeah, thank you for bringing us back to exactly what it is that is challenging our salmon and bringing those numbers down, and what kind of solutions that we're looking for to bolster those numbers in the future. And so in thinking about that, what are some of the other challenges in communicating some of these issues for these complex ecological issues in a way that resonates with our broad audience?
The communities that benefit from aquatic habitats, whether that's water that drives hydropower or river systems that supports navigation and the transport of goods and people, whether that's irrigation that supports ag communities, finding a balance in how we operate those that works with fish is a real challenge. We as humans are usually motivated by the resources that impact us most directly. And so if you're a farmer, you're really concerned about the water supply that you have for those crops. If you're tribal fisher, you're really concerned about the numbers of fish that are coming back to feed your family. In some ways, those are very similar. You think about farming practices and fishing; those are both food security issues, right? And how you maintain the environments that meet those food resources sometimes are competing. And unfortunately, as humans, we're pretty good at spinning messages to meet our own perspectives and not so good about listening or walking in other people's shoes. And so I think it is critical that we look for those messages that meet all needs and not to the entire detriment of someone else. How you do that is really difficult because it is complex. The science behind fish management and the diversity of fish stocks and the factors limiting those resources are really in depth. And in today's society, where you have to communicate in snippets of 30 seconds or less, it's really a challenge to communicate what those challenges facing fish are. For me, I'm still learning how to do that. Over the last couple of years, I've found that simplifying the message of how dire salmon and steelhead are doing really comes down to a simple cup and, saying historically that was full, what 16 million fish meant to Snake Basin stocks or, Chinook coming back to the Snake Basin, that cup would have been full. But today, the returns don't even cover the bottom of the cup. It's got to be boiled down to something that quick to catch people's attention. And once you have that, then you can have a meaningful dialogue about, the steps that are needed to be taken. A lot of work to be done on that and how we communicate. But it comes down to understanding that facts matter and listening to the experts and trusting that expert and respecting that information and what it's going to take. And then sitting down at the table and finding solutions that work for all and not just winners and losers.
So I just wanted to back up here for a moment. Earlier, there was a better spot for this question. And so I wanted to ask Dr. Giles, you were talking about, when we were talking about the southern resident and the river tributaries, somebody wanted to ask, where and when do southern resident orcas and the Columbia River salmon intersect? And so I think they just want to know where they're at simultaneously, maybe in the time and map of things.
Well, it changes throughout the year, but some of the key places are Swiftsure Bank, which is a bank, more shallow area, about 20 some odd miles off of the west entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca. So basically, Nia Bay, Washington. That's an important foraging area for the southern residents, and that's a staging area for fish that utilize that more shallow bank to kind of wait out the tide, depending on which way they're trying to go. And then also right at the mouth of the Columbia River, some satellite tagging that was done on the southern residents some time ago that has stopped since, I believe, 2016 or so. But prior to that, 12 or so southern residents were satellite tagged, and that data that was accumulated, that whole research project was done by the federal government, NOAA scientists at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center. They did that research, and the K's and L's looped at the mouth of the Columbia, especially in the late winter, early spring, a disproportionate amount of time compared to the other places that they were looping. Interestingly, Cape Cod was also seen looping around the mouth of the Klamath River, and that was obviously long before the dams were coming down. But another indication that that would have been a historically important river for at least Cape Cod and probably El Pod as well. So along the short answer is along the Pacific coast, from at least probably actually West Coast Vancouver Island as well, and then west of West Coast Washington, and down into right around the mouth of the Columbia.
Are actions that individuals can do to help with the recovery of the Chinook salmon and southern resident killer whales?
Can you repeat the first part of that, Angela?
What are key actions that individuals can do to help with the recovery of Chinook salmon and southern killer whales?
You know, one of the easiest things that people can do is, I always say, get your feet wet and your hands dirty. So participate, find out about and participate in habitat restoration projects that are happening really anywhere, from Monterey, California, all the way up through BC, Canada, including Idaho. So if you know these, these are often under, what do I want to say, underfunded and under manned or human. You know, these efforts take a lot of time. They take a lot of input. And so getting out there and helping to plant trees or do river restoration projects, or in some cases, there are projects that are rehabbing rivers where they're putting down woody debris and other, materials into rivers that are helpful for salmon. But planting trees along river corridors is so essential, because as Jay mentioned earlier, we're seeing this throughout all river systems, I would guess. The increase in temperatures in the river, sometimes temperatures so hot that they're lethal to the fish that are trying to spawn in them. And so replacing those river forests that have been removed, that riparian corridor on both sides, helping to restore those river systems. And then, I think as a consumer, how you spend your money is important. And so making sure that you're spending your dollars in a way that is beneficial to the ecology in which you're kind of supporting and living. I'm a big fan of eating locally whenever possible. That's going to cut down on greenhouse gases from moving food around, as well as just like taking a bit of pressure off of different ecosystems, trying not to feed farther away. That's a big issue, and it's challenging because of the way that our food is grown and shipped around the world. But just something to be aware of. One of the biggest contributors to climate change is food waste, and so the closer you can eat to where you live, the better.
I think those are really good messages. I would add in the contacting and supporting your local representatives and congressional representatives, and understanding that natural resources as a whole, but salmon and orcas are important to you as an individual, communicating that message to those individuals and asking them to be engaged and thoughtful in how we fund natural resource management and support, whether that's fish hatcheries or habitat restoration. But probably in today's society, it is a request for us to be thoughtful in planning the energy resources and water management aspects that are going to be central to growing populations. We're in a situation now where energy demand is forecasted to, it's not even forecasted, is growing at a rate not seen in the past. And we're going to have to build new energy generation and energy transmission resources to a great extent. That energy demand increase for the Pacific Northwest is predicted to jump by about 30,000 megawatts of energy in the next 15 to 20 years, I believe, is the time frame. So 30,000 megawatts, probably not a unit that means much to many of us, but understanding that breaching of the 4 lower Snake dams would take away or negate about 700 average megawatts. And so really the request and conversation that I think we should be encouraging and promoting our local politicians and congressional representatives to have is how do we build out the energy infrastructure in the Northwest for 30,000 megawatts in a way that works for salmon, which is just 700. And so that's just really a drop in the bucket. And so that strategic planning aspect and not just thinking about who wins economically in the next year or two is really important. And I think a conversation that needs to be had. So act locally, as Giles has said, but I think also encourage the strategic thought process by our political representatives.
Speaking of our political representatives, even before the Trump administration's mass layoffs and broad cuts to the federal government, the Columbia Basin had an infrastructure backlog of about $1 billion. Now, many vulnerable hatcheries are only able to survive with the help of volunteers. Jay, do these cuts affect the Nez Perce tribe's hatcheries and other tribal operations? And if so, can the hatchery system continue to operate on a shoestring budget for basic needs? And additionally, do hatcheries benefit or harm wild salmon?
Oh, those are big topics, Angela. So first I'll highlight that the federal government employment and early buyouts that had repercussions from the DOGE efforts earlier this year has greatly impacted the federal hatcheries in the lower Columbia. So those hatcheries operated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had a significant reduction in staff, and they've not been able to rehire or replace or backfill those staff that are no longer working there. And so those U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service hatcheries are significantly shorthanded right now, to the extent that there are efforts ongoing being led by the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission to drum up volunteers to help with spawning and cleaning raceways at those federal facilities. And so maybe this goes back to your last question. If you happen to live by a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service operated fish hatchery and want to get your feet wet and hands dirty, as Giles highlighted, there is opportunity to volunteer at those facilities. So go knock on the door and ask how you can be helpful. Your specific question in terms of Nez Perce tribal hatcheries and the collective hatcheries in the Snake Basin is those are not directly operated by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and so they have not been impacted by the staff shortage like the hatcheries lower in the Columbia Basin. That being said, there is significant funding that comes from federal sources for those hatcheries, and we have had to work pretty hard to maintain that, just operational wise. So far, that has been secured, but not guaranteed going forward. The maintenance backlog that you highlighted is a huge issue in terms of $1 billion backlog for both hatchery infrastructure and hydrosystem infrastructure that impacts fish. The that is something that can have amazing consequences when things break, and whether fish passage facilities as a dam or water supplies at a hatchery break and are longer functional, those are not small impacts. Those can have consequential impacts on large numbers of fish. So for the Lower Snake River Compensation Program, which is a mitigation program in the Snake Basin to return fish back that were lost because of the construction of the 4 Lower Snake dams, that hatchery program has about 500 million worth of assets in its suite of hatcheries. There's a $2 million a year maintenance budget for that 500 million set of assets. That's enough to do your kind of routine maintenance. It is not any kind of buffer for when big things break. And that is where the hatchery implementers do a lot of the MacGyvering and fixing things with baling wire and duct tape at this point. And so we are at risk of having some major stuff break, and we're trying to figure out how to reduce that backlog. So there was an allocation of money 3 years ago from a rates distribution clause from Bonneville that really helped prop up some of the Snake Basin hatcheries and the critical infrastructure that was limiting at that point. But we're back to just trying to keep the wheels on the cart at this point and try to catch up. The longer that backlog exists, the higher the risk for major things breaking occurs. And so we do need to figure that out. But the Snake Basin hatcheries, the ones that the tribe operates directly, and the ones that we co-manage with our state and other tribal co-managers, wheels are on the cart. There's a big list of to-dos that is currently unfunded, and we're trying to figure out how to fill that in the near term.
Thank you so much for that response. Dr. Giles, if the 4 Lower Snake River dams are breached over the next couple years, how long would it take for substantial runs to be enough for southern residents currently starving from the declined numbers?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that question because I'm not a fisheries biologist. But it's, I mean, my brain went to the old saying where, when was the best time to plant a tree? And it was 20 years ago. And when's the next best time, today sort of thing. The faster we can get the dams down, the faster we can start seeing the salmon return. I guess a little bit better answer might be if we look at what happened on the Elwha and what's happening right now on the Klamath, it's pretty fast. The fish come back pretty darn fast. So, there are some, when you take a dam out, there are some ecological restoration components to that. There's a lot of fill that backs up behind the dams that needs to flush out, things like that. But more specifically, I can't. I'm not the right person to answer that question.
Jay, do you have some feedback for that? How long it could take?
Yeah. I think the reality, just so that we're on the same page, for breaching of the 4 Lower Snake dams, that takes congressional authorization, and then it will take some time to put the money resources in place and take that action. So that being something that happens in the next couple of years is not reality. I think that from a fish standpoint, having that type of transformative action happen within the next 8 to 10 years is really critical for the fish. As we've looked at the trajectories of population decline, having that type of survival boost is really critical in the next 2 generations of salmon. The time frame that it would take to actually see a numeric response in fish, as Giles highlighted, in some ways will be immediate and benefiting fish that are coming back upstream. But for the majority of that, it's going to take a life cycle of and multiple generations to build these stocks back up. So removing the 4 lakes lower snake dams will have transformative effects on the numbers of juveniles making it to the ocean, and the condition of those fish once they do reach the ocean will be better, and their survival will be higher, and bringing more adults back. That will certainly boost the numbers of fish, but that takes a 4-year cycle before you start to see the fruits of that labor, even after you take the dams out. It will not be an instantaneous recovery back to healthy and abundant levels. It will take multiple generations. Hatcheries will play a role in boosting that to a quicker rate, but we don't have hatcheries associated with most of the natural production, and so that will take likely 30 to 40 years, 7 to 8 salmon generations with better survival before you'll get back to kind of the mid-range goal of healthy and abundant stocks that have been identified for target abundances for fish that would be sufficient for all of those feeding orcas and fish that are highly abundant to support tribal fisheries and recreational fisheries. So that's a long answer of saying it'll take 4 to 5 years once the dams come out to see higher numbers of fish. And then it'll take successive generations, of 30, 20 to 30 years after that to really build things back up.
Thank you. So looking at the response of the salmon after the Klamath Dam removals, the southern resident orcas have recently been seen farther south in the Puget Sound than they have been in decades. Does this mean that perhaps the fish habitat restoration work done there may be enough to keep the orcas from starving another few years until we can get some more success with the 4 lower Snake River dams and maybe increase the populations there? So is the restoration work with the Klamath affecting how far south the southern residents are going?
I think the question, if I saw it in the chat correctly, I think somebody was asking about the southern residents being down in Puget Sound. So that would be south of Admiralty Inlet, kind of closer to the Seattle area. That's not uncommon. They've done that at least since the study started 50 years ago. In the fall, the fish are down there chasing coho and chum at that time of the year. So kind of right now, October, November, December, something like that. It has not been uncommon or historically weird for the whales to be down there, because those species of salmon would have been down there. There have been some pretty excellent habitat work and tribal-led restoration efforts in the Puget Sound area that are benefiting the coho and chum down there. And so I'm, fingers crossed. We're planning on moving our research vessel down to the Kingston area last year from about October 18th through November 23rd. Southern residents were down in what's known as the triangle, so like Edmonds, Kingston, and then up to the bottom of Whidbey. They were there almost every day between October 18th and November 23rd. We're hoping for the same thing, so much so that I think all of the different research groups from the San Juans that study the southern residents are going down there at the end of this month, end of October through November. So hopefully those runs continue. The historic range of the southern residents was all the way down to Monterey. It's thought to have been down there. So foraging on fish coming out of rivers throughout California. So the Klamath, that area, as I mentioned earlier, the Klamath area, it is an interesting area for the whales. We did see that when they were satellite tagged, that especially K-Pod hung out there and was circling around the mouth of the Klamath. I think I said Columbia, I meant Klamath. And so that's kind of where the historic knowledge from the southern resident matriarchs comes down through the generations, where I always think about it as being, females that learned from mom or grandmother or even great grandmother would have been told that this area would have been important, an important area to hang out and intercept fish heading for that river. For the past 100 years or so, it wasn't so great for them, but 100 years is a short amount of time in the memory of a southern resident killer whale. So hopefully as habitat restoration efforts are continuing throughout the southern residence range, and as more and more dams are coming down and fish are able to recolonize, repatriate rivers that maybe they were extirpated from in the past, that's going to benefit the southern residents. So these whales are trying to go where historically they knew to go or were told to go. They have changed it up. This year has been just incredibly different. It's been changing since 2013, with the southern residents occupying what was considered their summer core critical habitat around the San Juan Islands and southern Canadian Gulf Islands. We went, they were actually here a fair amount, January, February, and March. April, they were here up at north, up into the Canadian Gulf Islands. And then we had them middle of April for just a short amount of time, just a couple days, mid-April. And then there were 75 days with no southern residents in the inland waters of the Salish Sea, which is very rare, just very weird. In the past, we would have expected to have them here from mid-May through September, foraging on salmon from Washington rivers, but also the Fraser River in near the terminus is at Vancouver, the city of Vancouver. This is changing. The southern residents are not able to come into the inland waters like they used to be. They're hanging out on the outer coast and intercepting those fish that are bound for other rivers. So, sorry, I totally got off on a tangent, but just kind of trying to give a feel for the historic routes that the southern residents would have gone to. And back to the question, again, not uncommon for them to have been in the South Puget Sound or Puget Sound proper, down closer to Seattle in the fall. And we do hope to see that again. And again, as the Klamath River continues to heal, I absolutely do expect to have K's and L's down there foraging on fish headed for that river.
I also understand that the orcas are going as far south as the Nisqually River Delta, which is south of Tacoma Narrow Bridge. I understand this is significant as the Nisqually tribe restored 750 acres of delta and removed 4 miles of dikes, which has been instrumental in restoring the Nisqually River salmon.
Yeah, those restoration efforts just cannot come fast enough. It's just fantastic to see how that estuary is rebounding.
Okay, so taking into account both the services that the dams provide and the fact that they contribute to the decline of salmon returns, what sort of processes would you initiate to facilitate dam removal? And would you advise what would you advise to be done to ensure essential services remain attended to, but salmon returns rebound? Jay, I'll take that over to you.
Yeah, big question. So first of all, understanding and summarizing what those essential services are, so that folks have a common playbook to look at, is really important. And then even if you're threatened by something being taken away that's important to you, engaging in a discussion of how that can be replaced, and open-minded about how things can be changed a little bit, but still workable in a way that works for salmon. The history has been, changes have been made on the backs of salmon and ways that don't work, and that mentality has to shift, and finding operations of the hydro system and the rest of our landscape, whether that's water usage or just where we build roads and build houses, in a way that's adequate for salmon. There's no more to give in a salmon perspective, and so if they're truly important and we want to achieve the goals that have been set for healthy and abundant by a diverse set of stakeholders and sovereign entities through the Columbia Basin Partnership, which there is wide support for doing that, taking the actions that are adequate, not just better or less impacting, but actually adequate to achieve those, is the crux. And so coming to a table with an open mind, having that list of options, and figuring out how you find something that works holistically is really what's needed. So the table for that to occur isn't currently established.
Jay, I really liked how you said that, even if threatened, being open to discussions about how to provide an opportunity for salmon recovery. I think that's really important. And I know that change can be scary, but I always go back to I had an opportunity to sit on the Snake River Dam work group that then Governor Inslee established after the main Southern Resident Killer Whale Task Force was finished. A separate Snake River Dam one was kind of convened, and there were about 18 of us or so that went around the state. We had 3 different meetings. In fact, it was the last thing that I did before COVID shut down air flights. And I remember being at one of them, and I had an opportunity to speak with a tribal member from Nimipu, and she was talking about her grandmother and great grandmother and the memories that they had of their villages that were in the area, and the fishing sites that their families had been fishing for I think 14,000 years, 12 to 14,000 years. And during one of the breaks, I had an opportunity to speak with her, and then when we came back, it was an opportunity for the public to comment or question the panelist. And somebody that was in agriculture got up and was talking about how upset it was to think that he was a 3rd generation farmer, and how upsetting it was to think that his kids were not going to be able to farm in that area anymore if the Snake River dams came down. And I invited him to have an opportunity, to take the time to talk to Carrie and learn from her and listen to her about how her family had been literally, their villages had been flooded, and those fishing sites were underwater, and how that felt, and kind of trying to help facilitate that dialogue. But it was shocking to me that I understand that would be disturbing for somebody that had been farming for a couple of generations, but I just have to say it's more disturbing to think that a way of life for 14,000 years had been taken away because of the dams. And it's just, maybe we're farming in a desert in a lot of cases on the east side of the state, and that needs to be taken into consideration as well. And the salmon are at the brink of extinction in a lot of cases, and in a lot of cases, the tribal culture, I don't mean to speak for the tribes, but the very culture of the tribes has been at risk of extinction since those dams went in. And so there's a balance that we have to figure out how to strike and do the best we can moving forward in order to help everybody, because the salmon can't hang on very much longer. Neither can the whales, and I think neither can tribes.
Yeah, it is very unfortunate. I would like to thank both you, Jay and Giles, for being here today and joining us as we are lifting up the urgency for this opportunity and the truth about what's at stake. This is about more than fish, and it's about honoring treaties, restoring a broken system, and building a future where salmon and people can thrive together and heal. And the title of today's conversation, From Millions to Memories, our work is to make sure that those shifts move us toward justice, resilience, and renewal. And we'll follow up with a recording, transcript, and ways to take action. In the meantime, I hope that you'll carry this conversation with you into your communities, your newsrooms, your classrooms, your families, and into your hearts. You can find a recording of this episode, upcoming events, and other information at columbiasnakeriver.com. And a quick reminder that on Wednesday, November 12th at 6 p.m., we will have an evening webinar. The last catch episode will be Our Treaty is Your Treaty. And so we look forward to everyone joining us then. Thank you so much and have a good day.